Hi, I'm Vladimir Pankrat with Indegene. I'm here to talk to you about scaling pharmacovigilance through digital transformation. And as part of the medical business unit at Indegene, we're very focused on that priority as we support clients in their journey through pharmacovigilance business requirements. It's an important priority, and just to give a little bit of a backdrop towards this business initiative, uh, across the industry, pharmacovigilance is a very important process that every pharmaceutical process has to abide by. It requires a monitoring and a management of the safety case reporting of each individual patient that's been exposed to a pharmaceutical product that's on the market, both in the clinical phase where there's an awareness and an observation of what is the safety profile of that patient, and then as it is matures and put into the marketing practice to promote across industries or across the markets. There's an opportunity to create visibility to what is that patient safety profile over the long term, over exposure across demographics. The management and monitoring of that safety profile of the patients is an obligation to each individual pharmaceutical company. And the pharmacovigilance practice is very central to that. They evaluate what are the data sources where PV safety case reporting is coming from, who are the patients and the healthcare providers that are managing that, what is the reportability of that to the local health authorities, and ensuring that there's visibility to the changing profile of that product as it relates to the safety on the patients. The PV practice then further has to go into looking at what is the aggregate insight and evaluating what is if there's a change in that profile. And the reportability of all this is a very highly compliant and process driven operation. At times, this can require hundreds of people that are working very closely in monitoring the individual safety case reports, ensuring that they're evaluating that safety case report for its individual quality issues, ensuring that there's a consistency and a completeness to that case, and the case is reported on time to those health authorities. I'm joined by several colleagues from across the industry, and I'll introduce them now and ask that they spend a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about PV transformation. What are they looking at? How are they seeing this evolving in the industry and pharmacovigilance? How do they drive those objectives to drive transformation in their individual organizations, ensuring they have a level of outcomes based on their expectations? And then lastly, what do they do to prepare their organizations for that change? So I'd like to take a few minutes. I'm joined by four colleagues. First, Gio Pajovic from Pfizer.
Yeah,
Gio.
hi, I'm Gio Pajovich from Pfizer. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to you all today, and thanks, Vlad. So I am head of the case processing and aggregate reports group at Pfizer. All in all, I've had over 23 years of experience, all within industry, all within pharmacovigilance, and I'm based out of College Hill. So nice to be here today, and nice to be joined by my fellow colleagues online.
Thanks, Gio. We're additionally joined by Steve Kuske from Sanofi.
Hi, Vlad. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Kuske. I'm the global head of PV operations for Sanofi. So it's case management, aggregate reporting, and the database. And looking forward to the discussion today. I think AI has been and automation has been a big part of what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Great, thanks, Steve. Additionally, Priyank Agarwal from Johnson & Johnson.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Priyank Agarwal. I'm part of Johnson & Johnson, supporting Global Medical Office IT organization, with global medical safety as being an integral part of it. Happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Priyank. And lastly, Michael Glazer from GlaxoSmithKline.
Thank you. As everybody else said, thanks for the opportunity. Safety Innovation Technology Director at Glaxo. I spend an awful lot of time dreaming about the art of the possible and what we can do with technologies like machine learning and AI. But I probably spend an equal amount of time thinking about what can we do today? What is available right now that we can leverage within PV, to make our lives a little bit easier and to focus on improving patient safety as well. So thank you.
Great, Michael. Thanks for that. And just to kick things off, to give a little bit more of a backdrop of PV transformation, what it means to you, what is it that you're seeing in the industry? What we'll do is we'll ask the panelists just to give their own impressions and opinions. Feel free to chime in. Starting off, Gio, maybe we can ask you the question initially around digital transformation and what does it mean to you? Can you give a little bit of an experience around what you see in terms of PV transformation, and what do you think should be accomplished?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. So, of course, I'll speak mostly from the case processing side, but if it's not limited to operations, right? It's signal management as well. But PV transformation to me means embracing technology solutions to support or enhance what are or were very manual processes, and exploring additional sources of data beyond spontaneous reports. So, over the past several years, even those companies that don't have a vaccine, adverse events reporting has gone up. We've seen increases in local health authorities providing line listings of adverse events following the EU modules. Not that they follow the EU modules, but akin to the same regulations, either downloading or sending us line listings from local health authorities. And then so the bolus of these cases have become more common. And in addition, there's always little nuances with every little, different format, different data, different regulations, like China, for example. So for PV organizations, we need to evaluate our digital infrastructure and business processes to maintain compliance, but also handle these. So to me, again, these external factors make it very important for us to be agile. I think we all know and agree we can't just increase the human footprint. So, it starts with thinking outside the box a little bit, not to overuse that expression, but simplifying your business processes, introducing automation, robotic process automation and AI, natural language processing to, both on structured data and then free text to help reduce the burden of these external stressors. And I think PV organizations must embrace, the digital transformation and keep it simple, realize early wins. We'll talk about this probably a little bit later too as the conversation goes on. But you have to have a long-term plan, but be agile and flexible and get some short-term wins as well. So, I think use traditional automation as rule-based approaches to meet the immediate need while you continue your journey. So that's what PV transformation means to me and to us. And just again became even more important with the vaccine and the large volume of adverse events we've seen there. So thanks.
I mean, I don't know. You want us to jump in, Vlad? I think.
Yeah, that'd be great. I see you're shaking your head, Steve. So feel free.
No, I think Gio. I think you pegged it. I think pharmacovigilance really presents a kind of almost unique opportunity, given the amount of manual human effort that goes into highly intensive human effort, repetitive human effort that goes into, say, case processing, and really provides an opportunity for that, opportunity to find efficiency and a better way to do things. And I think we'll probably talk more about this later too. Is that it's not just efficiency. I think automation provides consistency, and this is a process that really begs for more consistency, because that translates to quality. And so I think digital transformation really in pharmacovigilance area, especially at that base level, which you call your foundational level, really is an opportunity.
Great.
I think something that, let me just want to add one thing to that. I think something that gets lost is we all have the same core set of problems around efficiency and increasing case volume. We know this. But so I think something that gets lost is that the data that we have is incredibly valuable. And I don't mean from a monetization standpoint, but from a content standpoint around how can we think about leveraging this digital content, again, focusing ourselves on improving benefit risk for patients. How do we mine that information that we have? And again, I'm sure we're going to talk about that as well. But I think that's an aspect to me of digital transformation that doesn't always quite come out as the first or even maybe the 10th reason to start to transform. But there is things to think about beyond just that initial small wins. And thinking about it as an initial case processing maybe is how do we improve quality and the value of that content that we have. How do we use it?
So it's an interesting kind of trigger to challenge here, and maybe kind of continuing on this thread, and maybe Steve, I don't know if you want to kind of chime off of what you mentioned before, because on the one hand, I'm hearing simplicity, drive simplicity into the business process. On the other, there's a complexity as it relates to each individual patient. It's a medical judgment. It's an insight around what is that entire medical evaluation of that patient that's happening. And that's a very complex process to be able to do that. There's talk of AI, and I think you mentioned artificial intelligence. So how is that actually being applied? I mean, what's the reality of what we're able to do?
Well, I mean, I think Gio, you pegged on. You said something important earlier. Is that you go in with broad goals and opportunities. You go in like with, am I going for efficiency? What am I trying to do out of this? But you have to stay flexible because I think one thing about working with AI, it's a learning experience. And while you want to stay on your goals, you have to be flexible. I think we all know, if you get kind of maybe a roundabout way to answer your question, Vlad, is, I think we all know that a very good physician could look at a case on Monday, look at the same case on Friday, and maybe come up with different results on the same case. And I think one of the things that AI does introduce is organizing the information and doing it consistently. One great thing about AI is it makes consistent decisions. And I think, especially in the case, the case management area, helping bring consistency to that, and not replacing the human. I think that's one of the misnomers that I think we've learned, is that, but helping a human make a decision is I think one of the big values of AI, and taking a lot of the repetitive work out of the human being's hands, and handling that is a huge component of what AI delivers. I think, at least now, I think we all have hopes for it to bring a lot more to the table. In areas like I think, Gio, you mentioned signal detection, other areas where we think AI will deliver at some point. But right now, I think, taking it incrementally, these are like this efficiency, resource reduction, and quality vis-a-vis consistency is the big deliverables in my mind.
Priyank, what's your impression around this? I mean, obviously trying to drive that consistency, the data and the power of that data, and the analytics that can come out of that through AI. What's your thought about this?
Yeah, so just to first add around transformation, right? To me, PV is all around doing decision making centered around patients and consumers, and that too firmly based in science and data, right? And the most important thing in the current world is that how quickly we can get actionable insights that we need to prove effectiveness of new therapies to keep our patients and consumers safe. In terms of technology, again, as everyone said, right? To me, infusing intelligent technologies can bring simplification and improved capabilities to PV. The future holds the human plus machine model. The way I envision is a skilled team will use and engage AI to amplify their capabilities, and of course, assisting and fine tuning the technology. Now, you can apply the technology in the various steps of the workflow within PV, be it during case intake, be it during translation, signal detection. It could be so. There are various aspects of AI, and it has an applicability in the different areas. I think we have seen a lot more progress in terms of intake, where we are getting structured and unstructured data. I think now that everyone has saw the art of possibility, we want more, right? So now we are trying to leverage artificial intelligence or sort of intelligent automation across other areas.
And medical judgment. I mean, what Steve, you talked about consistency and obviously efficiency are key outcomes that you would expect from that. Do you think that there's an opportunity to drive more intelligence in the review of the patient safety cases?
Yeah, I do. I think, though, it's not like, again, in terms of evolving understanding of what AI delivers. I think, our learning has been, I think when we started it, we were like, we couldn't wait for that moment to get a case through AI, and it would, a human being wouldn't have to touch it. I think we've managed our expectations there, but in the same time realizing is build a system that leverages what AI and automation do best, and let the human being do what the human being does. And that really gets into like when you talk about medical review, and what we're finding is how do you provide the human who's going to make a medical assessment with the right data at the right time, so that and with a complete picture where AI can really help. Can AI surface up analysis of similar events as a person does a medical review, so that they're now making a more consistent decision that's more aligned with how other cases were decided. See, that to me, that's a perfect example of how the AI can really supplement medical review. But I think we all know too the challenges with medical review is it's I don't want to say it's an art form, but there's an art to it, and there's a lot of gray to it, and that's not also where we're finding AI's strongest suit. AI is not as good at the gray areas as human beings are, but AI can really help the process along. And that's kind of where we're.
Especially, yep. So just to chime in and just to add to what Steve said, right? Especially now with AI and modern technologies we have seen, we can bring a lot of things upfront. Like if you look at historically in the PV workflow, data comes in, then it goes to quality review, medical review, then gets submitted and then gets aggregated for signal detection. Now, with this new modern technologies, cloud computing, you can do some of those things as the data is coming into your system to augment the human, to support human. Eventually, human would be the decision maker. I don't think the technology has advanced to a point which, like Gio said initially, that it can replace human. But sooner we gather that insight, the follow-up actions that are driven by human intelligence can be better streamlined.
So kind of progressing into objectives to outcomes, clearly for organizations that are maybe starting on this journey, it may seem like an insurmountable task. How do you decide what's important, what's priority? Certainly there are initiatives out there in the industry that are helping to guide COMs, Transcelerate, or initiatives that are out there that help to provide some frameworks for organizations that are maybe new to this area. But what do you suggest are the best practices? What are those opportunities, Priyank? Maybe you can kind of chime in on this one, to put together a program like this. We've got great experience from technology side as well as the business here. So maybe hear from you first, and then the rest of the group here.
To me, any organization that is going through a digital transformation, the most important thing is change management. As a leader, it's important to find an ethical and compassionate way to bring our people in times of change, right? What we need to clearly outline is a process so that they can see the benefit of how these changes can help them in their day-to-day role, as well as align it with their long-term career path, right? We have to have a mission-driven, a purpose-driven roadmap, right? Now, one thing that question and that keeps coming back up is around ethical AI, as well as how this would be embraced by people. And that's where we need to make everyone understand that, technology will augment human. It will give them time to upskill themselves, to focus on decision making and a better suited task, which requires their trainings or the skills that they have gathered over the years. So it's while we don't want to get bogged down with these fancy things that are out there, yet be real. Make sure you take your organization with you. Make sure they understand how this is going to impact the overall operations within medical safety.
To add to that, I think change management is I agree, critical. I think there's also a desire to focus a lot on technology, right? How many times we ask questions around what can AI do? What about machine learning? Let's talk about intelligent automation. Those are to me, they're secondary questions. Let's focus really attention on a process. And how is the process, what are the problems in the process? How can you re-envision, or just, again, technology is a tool. It's that simple. And there's a companion piece that change management is, think about your process, reimagine it, and then use tech to solve problems. That is a very, to me as a technologist, that's a common mistake made, is to chase the shiny new object, because we were all talking about AI and AI is cool, but that's not where your focus should be. It should be on the process and what are the problems.
We had an earlier discussion, Michael. I think you brought up a really good example. It's that people want the AI and all this stuff, and sometimes it's a better designed screen is really what you need, or just revamping the process. So don't throw the whole toolbox out, right? Just AI is not one tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, I agree. If I could just add a little bit there, I was going to say something similar, but for us, I think that the big wins right away were in more of the automation and using the structured fields. There's so much, as you all know, that goes into case processing. If there's multiple suspect drugs, all those drug event combinations, and then determining the listedness for those, you need to get that right before you can start working on the AI picking up the words in the narrative in the natural language processing, because then if your terms are right, they still need to go through all that base process. So I think it's coming along, and I agree, you can't have the whole thing all at once, but if you focus on kind of what I would call the more simple things where process automation helps, as far as structured fields, data exchange, using the product event relationships, et cetera. You need to get that right regardless. So if you're not, my advice would be, if you're starting from scratch, get that done first, get that right, and then work on, the other pieces where it's a little bit more, the AI and natural language processing come into play.
I'll share an example. I was on a call today. We were discussing an intake problem, where for this particular step of the process, there's roughly a 20 to 30% failure rate. The immediate conversation jumped to, well, we can use NLP and some maybe I'll call it advanced ML to actually act as a QC engine for that process. That is beyond illogical to me. Why don't we focus our attention on what are these, the 20 to 30%? What's putting out? Why? Let's fix that. And again, focus on your problem. And it was a simple, automation type of a rules engine that was causing issues. We don't need cool, shiny toys, for everything. All right.
No. It's a fine line. I think I agree with you absolutely. It's a very fine line. If you can fix the problem at source, right, then there is no need to introduce another thing. And we see this very often. I'm sure you guys are experiencing the same, Gio and Steve, but it's no different in J&J as well.
No, I agree. I think you don't start building the second story of the house until you got the first one at least framed up, right? I mean, I think, and I think a lot of this technology is great stuff, but I guess I would just emphasize again, for outcomes, be practical. What are you trying to achieve? Have a plan. What do you expect to get out of it? It may, again, to your point, Gio, earlier, it may change because you don't know what you don't know, but have a plan, and if you deviate from it, do it consciously, and like you said, Michael, it's like, what is the right technology to support what the process or the deliverable I want to achieve? That's the second question, right? It's like,
right, exactly.
So if I want to open this up a little bit to the group, and maybe if you can consider this, because you've been through this journey yourselves, and in some ways, I think you mentioned that there was a use case of somebody coming and asking the question. Now, how do you organize this so that the business says, okay, and Steve, you touched on the point that was more user experience oriented, to try and drive simplicity in the way, the screen view is being presented, that can maybe drive simplicity, and that can also create efficiency as an outcome. But how does the organization decide what are the priorities to focus on? And then number two, was what you expected really the outcome of, or what you designed actually an outcome that you expected? Or was it an iterative process? Did you actually have to go back and forth and really refine the scope and the framing of what you're actually going to deliver?
Well, who do you want to take that? Why do you want? I mean,
I opened it up. I think if you can start, that'd be great. And then
we call it a very iterative process and very focused on efficiency. So that was, to my mind, it was a business plan. We went to finance. We went to senior leadership in the company and said, look, we think we can do this and we can deliver X. And we explained to them how we were going to deliver X, because we use a lot of vendors, and we're going to go back. We're going to provide a more efficient process, and we're going to negotiate with our vendors, and we're going to reduce our costs. And so that required, so to me, the work was yeah, there's a technical bit that Michael brings up, and he's right, but there's a whole bunch around the process. There's a whole bunch about negotiation that all had to happen to make that successful. And to your point, you said we did it in stages. So we did it in stages, 3 stages to kind of get where we are today. And it was practical and a business plan, which I can't emphasize that enough, because that's how we got finance behind us to support us. So and they supported the next stages of it because they saw deliverable results, and we actually saved money. And at the same time, like I said, we gave quality too. So that was, we went in with a prediction. We said we're going to save money and we're going to get better quality, and we were able to demonstrate that. And I think it's not. I don't think it's any different than anything else in business, right? You have to have a plan and you have to deliver. So stay practical would be my first advice on this.
And Michael, you touched a little bit on this as well, where you mentioned that the business sometimes comes with the business problem. Their articulation of that is maybe not well refined, and they might have an expectation. I think the idea, like we've all said, AI and the ideas around it maybe are a little bit fantastic. So those expectations might be a little bit, extreme in some respects. How has that happened to really kind of refine the expectation, really go through what might be 10 business requirements and really refine it to say, this is what's feasible. This might require some phases associated from a technical rollout standpoint. What's your experience been, Michael? Maybe Priyanka, if you want to chime in on that as well.
We definitely have a tendency, again, and I think it's a good tendency to dream big, right? I think that's great. Always start with the fantastic vision, and then start to break that down into, again, I think as Gio and Steve have said, into a little bit smaller blocks about, okay, this is the grand scheme. What can we really accomplish? What's feasible? What's here today? What's a little bit more futuristic? And I think we do a pretty good job of trying to walk through that from a technology and a business standpoint. And it's all about trade-offs. If the business has a grand vision, and we can only, with 4 pieces, and we can only solve 3 today, and we can justify it from a business case standpoint, we solve the 3 today. And then we leave the 4th, depending on, again, what it is. Maybe that's next year. Maybe that's an investigation piece around, can we, is it AI, or what do we do? And we really kind of go through it in a somewhat of a stepwise process. And again, Steve said it around emphasizing the business case. I agree. If you can't justify and I don't view the process within PV from that standpoint any different than any other business problem. It is about money. It is about how do we take the limited dollars and resources that we have and better utilize them. And if we can show that there's a benefit, not just for cost savings, but on quality of the information, and that it will translate into a benefit for our patients, we're going to figure out a way to do it. And for the things that don't meet that bar, we always have them in the back of our minds to think about, if new information, again, that agile concept of, I've learned something, should we relook at this? Again, and that's really how we do it.
Great.
To me, it's fit to purpose, right? It all starts with the strategy, right? Every organization has a strategy, and you put that strategy, and each use case should tie to it, right? Everybody looks at their problem and they feel that's the biggest problem, right? And which needs immediate addressing by implementing, supplementing, or complementary technology, right? So what we follow is the same thing, right? Okay, this is a use case, how it ties to the overall strategy, and then what would be the return on investment. And doesn't mean return on investment has to be cost driven. It could be cost saving, cost avoidance, quality improvement, better service to our patients. There are different ways to measure that, right? One of the example I would like to share is we have this as part of our transformation. We aspire to automate almost 80% of or bypass 80% of our intake, right? So that they don't get human touched in the intake. And then, of course, now, you get the data from various sources. You get the data through LSOs, through call centers, through patient support programs. And because you rely on these external organization, no matter how hard you try, you can never implement a standard, right? So yes, now can technology come and assist? Absolutely. But what is the volume? If you're talking about 5,000, 6,000 cases, does it make sense to go ahead and do it, right? So doing that thorough analysis, thorough process mapping, how it ties, I think that becomes very beneficial. And even it also helps the people who are putting the request in front of you, right, to understand how it's going to impact overall holistically.
So maybe kind of considering the last section here, and we've got a couple of questions that are coming in. So maybe this is something, Gio, I'm going to ask if you can maybe chime in on this. We talked a little bit about change management before and preparing the organizations for that, but there's always that risk of compliance in the time of change. So regardless, there's always new products, there's always new data channels that are coming in, and this is a reality that the organization needs to do that. But underlying within that, when you start introducing technology, that becomes, I'm sure, a big concern. So what's your suggestion? What do organizations need to consider when going through this to make sure that the people are on board? And what's your recommendation to this?
Yeah, sure. So thanks. And just to clarify, I mean, I think that the change management piece to making sure people have been on board has been pretty well covered. I mean, the only thing I would also say is there's also a lot of anxiety. Like I think as Steve mentioned before, people might perceive this as replacing humans, and that's not the goal. So making sure that people are involved in the process, in the decision making, how they can contribute beyond what was before more or less a cut and paste data entry, and why that their role now is more important. But as far as compliance, I would say make sure you have a good quality plan, and hopefully you have one anyway. But the quality plans measure for timeliness and for case quality. So we have timeliness and case quality metrics at Pfizer, and we stick to that plan. And if metrics drop below the thresholds, the predefined thresholds, then we take action. We report those as sort of quality events or follow up on those and make sure we're doing the right thing. So I would say, as far as compliance and quality, have a predefined quality plan up front. What are your measures? Is it the 15-day timeliness, the aggregate report timeliness, and then case quality? Are you looking at upgrades? Are you looking at just number of things recoded in the case, et cetera? And we can go into a lot of detail on that, but just I think basically having a good quality plan, having established metrics and thresholds, and having a plan to what you'll do if things drop below, and then you can you could defend your new process.
Okay. And you mentioned around this, yeah, we touched on change management. I would imagine in line with that process, you've got individuals that are dedicated, that bridge between what is the technology team's implementation of the new program, the learning and development that goes along with that, and then likewise any change champions that are really close to what is the design of that transformation initiative going to accomplish, right? I mean,
yes, certainly. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to be remiss there, but yes, certainly. I mean, I think that's classic change management and setting realistic expectations for everyone, right? Too. That's the other thing too. Leaders in the company tend to want to see results right away. So, as Michael and Steve have already mentioned, if you have those little short-term goals and achievable outcomes, that goes a long way in the faithfulness of further continuance of the projects.
Yeah, and I just add one other thing on the change management, because if you're doing this right, you're actually changing what people need to do in the system, right? So you're going from a system, if you're talking about case management, where you need lots of people to do individual cases, you still need them, but now you need, if you're really looking at structured data in your system and you're managing a lot of structured data to really maximize what the AI does, now all of a sudden you need people with those skill sets that are going to help you optimize and make sure that the structured data is right, that this stuff is loaded up into the system. I mean, you've always needed that in the past, but the ratios, what we're finding is the ratio starts to change with the people. You need more people managing that system process than you do maybe, and less people in that system doing the traditional work. And you should be looking at, is that your goal? So while you are offsetting in one area, you may have to build up another area, and that has to be an important part of your change management, I think, as well.
So is that it's an interesting kind of segue really around competency. So is that all part of the kind of awareness that, you know, upskilling or cross-skilling resources is all part of what you're going to have to do, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you think about how many labels you need if you're really talking structured labeling, which is a big discussion we're trying to push forward here. And you think about just the number of products and the number of labels that apply to every product, and you're a company like Pfizer or Sanofi, and you have a lot of products, or J&J, you have a lot of products, or GSK. That's a multiplier in terms of managing all that information, and that requires a different, maybe a skill set or a number of people for those skill sets. That's different.
So I know we've had a couple of questions coming in. I think a lasting question maybe for you, Michael, I wanted to ask around unexpected challenges in going through these implementations. I don't know if you've got an example of something, or if not, maybe some of the other panelists can talk about a case in point example of something.
Maybe just two things. So that I think the first one is the skills. You know, we've talked a little bit about that. I think a little bit. It's been interesting as some of our skills needs have changed, and how do we? I don't want to say scramble, but how do we start to develop plans that kind of enable people to build their skill sets a little bit differently, particularly in the areas of data analytics and visualizations are things we're focused on right now. You know, again, trying to broaden that skill base for the organization. So some skills challenges I think can be expected. The second thing, variety of data, right? We know we have a lot of different data sources and types, and we know that, but it really is much, our problem there is much bigger. You know, if you take any type of form that we have, right? And you can't think of that as one form and just leave it at that. When you start to really dive into it, the types of data, the content of data, again, is very single entities within that form are enormously varied. And how do we start to think about those as really unique variations in types of information? What do we do with them all? And it's been that, I think, has been a surprising thing that's caught us in terms of being able to focus. I think the initial, some of our initial ideas, again, just thinking around intake for a moment, was we have X form types. Well, that's X things to process. And it really isn't. It's X kind of, you know, maybe some factorial or exponential number on the end of that to start to dive into the nuances and the real content within those form types. I think that's been a surprising thing for us. So we've had to start to segment our thinking, not around just form types, but the data variations within those forms. Again, I think Gio and others have mentioned it, the agile thinking, right? In terms of, okay, well, we've learned something. So instead of this week, our being able to handle, this form, we're only going to handle a subset of that form. We're going to have to reevaluate the data variations within that. And what do we do next? Again, that's, to me, been a very surprising thing for us.
And those variations, in some ways, I imagine, and the power of that data really begin a question of, is artificial intelligence really changing what we do? Is medical judgment really accelerating more, where we can look to see, how does it relate to a potential signal? And maybe this is the next venture that we go into. I don't know if the group here, maybe open-endedly, if anybody wants to comment on that, but that seems like maybe a maturity curve that we go down to begin to really drive more of a focus around that impact earlier on. What are the thoughts? I don't know if you have a reaction to that, Gio, from your side. Are we able to drive medical judgment earlier, do you think?
Well, yeah, thanks. I think what I would say, yes, I wouldn't say earlier per se, but maybe quicker. And I know it sounds like the same thing, but I think what area I can help with the medical judgment is maybe firstly, probably the initial triage up front, recognizing serious events. And like Steve said, again, it's not about necessarily replacing people. It's just being consistent. How have you treated this type of case in the past? It's easy if there's an always critical term, that's an exact match, but a description of the case that someone can pick. So I think that can be picked up earlier. And then, overall, that puts it into a queue of serious cases, and then you can do a QC on the cases that were not serious to make sure, maybe that's where the human comes in. So, sorry for sounding a little picky on semantics there, but I think really, the AI could make things happen a little faster, and maybe in the realm of medical judgment and categorizing cases, and causality assessments, right? It's taking that same type of, what case attributes are you looking for in causality? Could you initially triage them and then have them reviewed? That's where I see it being next. I'd like to hear what my other colleagues online think about that as
agree
well.
with that,
But
Ian.
yeah,
I agree with that, and I would just say that unfortunately though, AI helps you do that quicker, as you said. Unfortunately, one of the things I think AI doesn't do, and it's one of the things especially in the operational area, always get criticized on, is the paucity of data. It's just not like, if the data is not there, AI can only help you with the data you have. And so some of these, it's not a panacea for all the problems that we have and challenges we have. And a lot of times with medical assessment, it's where at least where I experience the most complaints is, we just don't have enough data. We don't have enough information about that patient. We want more information about that patient, especially for critical cases. So those are things where, the human being has, and their ability to follow up and get more information still has a very important role. So I think it's always, again, back to life, like we've all been saying, is it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve everything. It's not a magic pill. And you need to focus on the practical aspects that it's going to support and help you with.
Great. We're coming on time in a few minutes here. We do have a couple of questions that have been coming in. I just want to allow a few minutes to be able to address these. One of the questions, maybe Priyank, you're able to answer for us. Do you see examples where confidence from natural language processing and AR and AI are being used to determine when a case needs human in the loop?
Well, yeah. So AI, we need to look at AI as a recommendation engine. Okay, to create a model, you need to teach a model. Okay, to teach you establish a baseline using a historic data, right? You go through the process of implementation. Then over time, as the new data comes in, the recommendation engine will give you a recommendation, but there would be drifts. There would be new. We just spoke about the varieties of data, right? It could be very different when we start using the recommendation engine on the live data. So to me, human in the loop is always going to be there if you want to improvise and keep up with our baseline of the recommendation engine. The question then becomes is, how do you bake it or embed it into your existing workflow, right? Because that is where you start losing efficiency. So, it varies from use case to use case, but to me, human in the loop is a very essential component to create this learning system.
Great. And I think we've got time maybe for one more question here. I'm going to direct it maybe to Gio, if you can answer. Well, case process, and then maybe others can chime in as well. But while case processing has limits in improving the lives of patients directly, do you anticipate quicker decisions can reduce the risk for patients themselves?
Well, let me make sure I'm answering this correctly. Yeah, I do think. I mean, if you're processing the case more efficiently, faster, you should be able to get the decisions faster. And I think a trickle on to that is then you could look at other sources of data, right? As Steve mentioned, there's only so much data in spontaneous data, and maybe that frees us up to look at additional data sets. And that's probably another topic for a whole other panel of people, probably even a lot smarter than me. But I would say, right, that opens it up to longitudinal databases, claims databases, social media. We could be looking at stuff. So I do think there's an impact to helping patients, because if we can get rid of the manual stuff faster, we could focus on the signal management and refinement.
I would just add to you, Gio, I would just say that I think it also helps us reduce the risk of a misassessed case, or at least ensuring that our cases are, and that leads to better quality data and quicker decisions too.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so much all for your time today. I really appreciate a very interactive conversation. It's been really great to hear from you, and definitely your experiences hopefully have been helpful to the audience today. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
for-
opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.